Hey, what's up, everybody? Our guest today is Aleks Rybchinskiy. And the reason why I brought you on today, one of the many reasons I brought you on today, Aleks, is, the first of which is I just find you a very interesting human being. I'm sure you get that a lot, judging by our previous conversation. But what I find very interesting about you is that you come across, and maybe you just are, like uber confident, very confident. You'll just say things very straight, and especially in the circles that, or at least the way that I've kind of set up the podcast, and I think a lot of the audience, and I think just a lot of people in society, I think I know one of my shadows is that I have a hard time at times perceiving the difference between confidence and arrogance. And so a lot of the time when you come across someone like maybe yourself who is very, they come on, like, you come on very strong, you come on very direct, and you come on, from my experience with you at least, in you'll state things as if there's not very much room for anybody else's perspective that is speaking to you. And again, this could be my shadow, my projection onto you. But again, I find you very direct, and it's like, okay, this is my perspective, 100%. And what was interesting is after, like, that was very confronting to me the first time I came across you. I was like, okay, I don't know where I and Aleks can find any common ground. It's like, if I don't agree with Aleks, like, how is this going to work? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't seem like there's very much push and pull, but, we were supposed to have, I think, a half-hour conversation. We ended up going for an hour and 15 minutes. And it was kind of in that time that I went, you know what? Aleks is actually very generous. He's very gracious with his time. You gave me a whole tour of your home and all of your equipment. And then we actually kind of got into a little bit of a heart-to-heart later in our conversation. And I've been actually thinking about that conversation for the last week. A lot. I've been thinking that I'd kind of put people into like two boxes, like kind, compassionate, and open, and then confident, arrogant, and closed. And this is why I find you fascinating. And one reason why I'm very excited about our blossoming of friendship, if it does turn into a deeper friendship in the future, is that I think that your personality is something that I want to get much more used to, because I think it would open me up to different experiences in my future. And I'm hoping that anyone that comes across this podcast and trusts me knows that I only have people on that I see as good people. And so if I have you on, that there must be something to you beneath the surface, especially on a compassionate level, because that's something I value very highly, is people that are open-hearted and loving. And so this is all to say that, yeah, I find that our society, we have a hard time compartmentalizing confidence and arrogance. And so, Aleks, welcome to the show. And what's your perspective on all that kind of stuff?
It's all based on, in my experience, what the person's talking about and how much you know and can bring to the table. So, for example, if maybe someone doesn't know something about a certain topic, their ego may be challenged, so they write it off as arrogance. And there's a point where, let's say when I'm teaching, and I'll have a student try to correct me, and then I'll tell them that's not a thing. And eventually I'll go, well, Google it. Like, go look it up, go study it for yourself. And it could be something like simple, like someone called me out and said that rolling your ankle out is inversion because they're pointing their foot, or the eversion. And I'm like, no, the bottom of your foot when it points in is eversion or inversion. And they were like, no, that's eversion. I was like, go look it up. I don't want to argue about this. I want to keep teaching. And then one of the instructors in the back was like, no, he's right. So there's a level of, once you know what you're talking about, there's no shaking that. And so that's where I want to get to, is that unshaken truth, because I have so much things going on, and to have a conversation has to come in a place of something else that I'm doing in my life. And so if I'm having a conversation, it's either I'm not doing yard work, I'm not building my business, I'm not with my family, I'm not playing with my kids, I'm not taking care of myself or my dogs. So it's like I have to sacrifice something to share something. And since I sit alone and ponder thoughts and read and research and apply and in my own time to stop doing that, to tear away from a client and answer a question to someone that's upset on Instagram. I have no time for it. So because I'm not going to sit there and lecture them, which they probably wouldn't respond to anyway, they're going to write it off as arrogance. And, oh, they're so arrogant. They don't even have the time. It's like, no, I do. Gotta go look into what I'm saying. Oh, where are the references? Go find them. Go prove me wrong. That's all I care about. And if you prove me wrong, I'll listen and I'll change the way I think. And I think that's where people get more stopped with me. They're like, oh, there's no change in this guy. It's like, no, I'll change on the dime if I find something that's worth changing my whole paradigm for. But I've spent a lot of time weeding my mind and weeding my thoughts and my emotions and how I want to show up to the world and how I want to create the world. And so when people meet me, they're afraid to draw the sword, so they step away and they label me as something else, and that's for them. That's okay. I'm perfectly comfortable with people labeling me with whatever they want, because it always comes around and they meet me and they're like, he's actually really freaking nice, and he listens and he's really compassionate, and I didn't expect that from the first round and of communication with him. And I definitely can see how people would use arrogance to mask a lack of knowing or study. Like you see doctors, or you see like fitness coaches, they'll mask their lack of continued education, and not only like the amount of education, but the amount of processed and applied for years of education, with like, if I admit that I'm wrong, then no one will trust me. But that's far from the truth. That's an egoic concept. Versus when you tell people you don't know, they actually trust you more. So for me, since I've spent so much time around CHEK, I've spent so much time with actual working, like applying these principles to my life and to my clients and my family. I know when these things work, and I know when they've changed. And so, and I know when people apply them or don't apply them properly. And I know when people apply them properly with their whole heart behind it, they get the outcome. And I tell people often that I use my family, like not in a weird way, but I reflect on my family to know how I'm, like, if my kids are upset, my wife is upset, I know something in me is not grounding properly. So then I go and I tune myself up, search inside, what is that thing that's causing me to be unstable? And then when I find that thing, I look up and all the dogs are calm, the cats are calm, the animals or my kids are calm. And then like my wife is doing the thing that she wants to do without like, kind of looking around or whatever, being on eggshells. And I'm like, okay, that was it. Cool. And then I move on in my life. And then I try to reapply that, so that way it continuously creates harmony until I run into that moment again. And then I'm like, well, what is it now? What have I not learned from this experience? So then doing that for years and years and years of my life creates this this level of self-reassurance that I know what I'm talking about because I've applied it, versus someone who's read it in a book and regurgitated it. And so to those kind of things, I speak very confidently on. And then on things that I'm not so sure, I always tell people, I'm like, hey, I'm still studying this. This is what I found. And I'm always enjoying when people provide information to add either on top or like give me a perspective to think on, so then I can go and process even further. What am I missing? So how can I make this bulletproof? So when I post something, there is no argument. And the only argument people can say is childish. And then no one listens to childish arguments. Adults don't, at least. So that's how I even write my Instagram posts. Like, if you disagree with this, that means you either, one, don't know enough, need to study more, because the things I write are very intelligently tailored to create a point or to highlight a shadow. And then you see what I mean?
Oh,
and
yeah.
those kind of things, and those kind of, because I put that much effort, and that's why I don't post daily, because it's such a headache to post all the time. And I try to keep things as authentic as I can with the time that I have and the willingness that I have And I definitely see how people can see that as arrogant if they're insecure about maybe the level of information they know about a certain topic.
Yeah, that's actually yeah, you actually just outlined that in a way that I hadn't thought about it before, or at least I'd thought about it, but like you kind of just gave the final puzzle piece, like because everyone talks about like if something offends you, it's your shadow, or it's something that you're insecure about, and I always understood that cognitively, but I didn't. But when you were speaking, I went because I remember being a bit confronted when I met you, and then when you were just speaking that, I was like, okay, what was it about that? And I could realize it was one of my old shadows from when I was a kid. I felt like if someone doesn't invite me forward, they don't care about me. And then when you do end up talking to someone who, I don't know, you can, in astrological terms, you can call it like a very Aries like energy, that very force of will, the me, I'm here to share myself with the world. For someone with my shadow, that comes across as arrogant because I don't feel valued, seen, or in some sense even, I guess you could say, safe, because you feel safe when you feel connected. And then if you don't feel a connection with somebody, you don't feel that safety. So that's interesting. And then, what you just said, I was like, if I paraphrase you correctly, like, this is my opinion. If you disagree with it or whatever, you're either like wrong or I'm wrong. That's interesting too, because definitely from my experience on social media in the world today, that is like a no-no. Like that's very confronting to people. Anyone that is extremely assertive and they say, you know what, if you disagree with this, I've done my research, you're probably wrong. It's like the whole, let's say, like politically correct movement and everything is very much like nobody's right. Like there's almost this idea that I've observed in society now that like you give the participation trophy to everybody, and again in some sense I see both sides of that. I don't think it's all bad. I think I get the point, but I think there's definitely some problems associated with it. Now, but there is this thing like if you speak, that's kind of what it feels like to me. If you speak in a manner that you are breaking apart from the status quo, you're wrong. It's almost like, in some sense, that politically correct movement a lot of the time is we're all in this together. And that any separation of any leadership or whatever is confronting to everybody else, and we push you down. And then so what you just said, from what I kind of gathered, I could feel why that would be extremely confronting to people, because a lot of people are insecure about their intelligence, are insecure about their appearance, are insecure just in themselves. And yeah, feeling at times like somebody is not lending the hand down to lift you up, I think can be very confronting to people,
Yeah, I can even say, when you mentioned political correctness, like if someone who believes in political correctness, I would say something to them like, well, political correctness is actually more divisive than speaking directly to your observation. And to someone that thinks political correctness is unifying, that will actually absolutely blow their paradigm apart. Because then when you're observing something, you're labeling it correctly. And then people can go, yeah, that makes sense. But when now you're withholding information because of political correctness, hoping that the person doesn't get offended, which, or feeling like they were heard or seen or whatever, it highlights to me that the person is still a child, because I don't need people to see me. I see me. I know what I'm talking about because I've seen it. And so it's like the tadpole and the frog story. Have you heard that one?
No.
It's like there's two tadpoles, and then one tadpole evolves into a frog a little faster and goes on land. And then there's a bunch of little other tadpoles, and the frog comes back and he goes, you got to get up there. There's land. And they're like, what's land? And they're like, there's air. And they're like, but what's air? What do you mean you breathe? Like, aren't we in the thing that we're breathing right now? It's like, no. It's a whole separate world up there. And then the tadpoles are like, you're crazy, man. And the frog's like, how do I explain it to them? And they can't unless they go experience it. And only when they're ready can they go experience it. So it's one of those things where the frog can get agitated, and if he brings the tadpoles to land, they'll die because they haven't evolved to be on land yet.
Hmm.
And those are those same concepts where if you see yourself, there's no one's going to talk you out of the things that you've seen. In my mind, I'm thinking they probably haven't seen it. And that's okay. Like a child arguing with me about how a thing is pronounced. I'm not going to argue with them about that. Like pig Newton versus fig Newton. Like as Louis C.K. says, I can read the box. Like I know what it says. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And otherwise, it's like, why are you arguing with a 2-year-old? So there's a point of a maturity that if people aren't mature enough to have a conversation, and it's not whether we're like, I'm wrong or you're wrong. It's like, how do we all learn is where I'm at. And so I'm going to present a very, very strong observation and experience of my life. And then people will share theirs. And then we have a conversation around it. And then if none of us want to learn, or like if the other person doesn't want to learn or perceive that I'm not learning, that's okay. But that's their mistake because I'm always learning how they're sharing the information, what they're sharing. I'm processing it and sifting it through my psyche. And I'm always learning. And I'm like, whether the earth is flat or round, if someone proves to me that the earth is flat, I'll change my whole way of thinking. If someone shows me the math for how the earth is flat, fine. Like I'll get behind that. If someone walks me to the edge and was like, take a look. And I'm like, oh, you're right. Okay. So I have no problem with changing the way I think and feel and experience life. I know a lot of people haven't thought through life enough because they're too busy watching sports and playing video games and participating, going to the bars and chasing girls. And they haven't really dug deep enough into life to have even a conversation. You know, because all they know is like the starting lineups to every team and what their fantasy score is. And I'm like, I don't care about that stuff. I care about the things that bring my family harmony and bring people health and happiness and wealth and sustainability and how to make the earth better and how to leave it better for my family. Like that's what I care about. And so if that doesn't fit into that, then I don't have an interest talking about it. You know, with my wife's parents, her dad loves football. So I'll talk football with him because I used to play football for 11 years. And so I can still hang in the football conversation and it makes him feel good. So I can, not in a condescending way, bring myself to the level, but I don't expect him to talk about his childhood traumas because that's not where he's at. So it's okay. So I'm going to meet him to have at least connect with him where we're at on a psychological level. And I can still have a good time doing so because every now and then something pops up that I'm like, ooh, I didn't think you mean to say that, but I picked up on it and I'm going to go share it with my wife or your daughter and we're going to go learn from it because some things slip up. So I'm always willing to learn. And if, people aren't confident, draw the sword with me, then it's okay. I'm comfortable with that, but they should know that it's not because I don't care about them that I don't engage. It's because I care about them that I don't engage at times.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, there's How old are you?
34.
34. Yeah. Do you know very much about astrology, Myers-Briggs, personality types, any of that kind of stuff?
I know a little bit about Myers-Briggs. I have a bigger grasp on astrology, tarot, even bigger grasp on tarot, archetypes, all those.
Yeah.
Those Jungian philosophies.
Yeah. The reason why I'm curious about that is, when I'm listening to you, what I'm, in some sense, what I'm hearing is a lot, I'm guessing, would you say a lot of the conversations you have are with very mature intellectual people where you're trading information and sharing and like very growth oriented? because I'm thinking of this like this balance between different kinds of conversations are almost for different kinds of things. Like there's the conversations you have to learn. Even in some sense, like that's what a lot of a podcast is sharing information. And then there's other conversations, and again, I think it depends like where you are in your personality, literally, of like how agreeable you are, how disagreeable you are, how compassionate you are, how like conscientious. There's all these things where, like for me, it's just a part of my personality. I'm extremely interested in merging in some sense. For me, it's probably the reason why I was drawn to podcasting, is that so much of the whole point of conversations for me, and this is also, I think, because also you're in a coaching and a leadership position a lot of the time, where for me as a podcaster, a lot of what I do is about sharing something, having someone else share something, and then creating something together. Everything is almost like creating another entity, like this idea, building an idea, or building this shared experience. And in podcasting, at least the way I've done it and the way I've learned how to do it, a lot of the recipe of that is being extremely attentive to people and pulling them forward and pulling out their thoughts, perspectives, and opinions on things. And I'm formulating a question as I go with this for you. What is your perspective on like different kinds of experiences, different kinds of conversations, and how are they valuable to you in different ways? Do you know what I'm getting at here?
I'm going to try to answer it. Let me know if I'm not on what you're asking. I value conversation to the degree that the person that I'm having a conversation with can add something to what I'm sharing. Because if they don't, then it becomes a teacher-student role where I'm basically sharing the things that they're pulling out of me and asking questions, which I do on a daily basis, and I love doing it. And then there's times where it affects when there's a lapse of boundaries, when I set up a time to do something like that, and then it goes beyond that time and it affects other things in my life. And especially if I'm not receiving any sort of reciprocation of two intelligent, growth-minded individuals that want to learn, then it becomes, I feel like it's a parent-child relationship. And a lot of those relationships happen when people don't establish their values and boundaries. And so if they don't have these boundaries in place, or let's say, for example, they're insecure about feeling like the bad guy or looking like the arrogant guy, when that's not for me to argue with anyone to say I'm not arrogant. Whatever their perception is, that's their perception. I'll do my best to work on that, but I'm also not going to change fundamentally who I am and agree with them to get them to stop thinking I'm arrogant or whatever. I'm inspiring people to learn more. So that way, when they do learn more, they'll go, oh, and have a little bit of humility, because I've been humbled many, many times over, especially by Paul. So in front of a lot of people. And it's one of those things where I wouldn't waste my time if Paul was mean and didn't add value to my life. So I always ask, is what he's saying true? Yeah, of course. Have I applied this yet? No, I need to keep applying this. Okay, I'm going to keep applying this. And when I've applied this to the degree that I either, one, disagree and I found something different, then I'll raise my hand or pick up my sword, and then I'll go and challenge something. 99.9% of the time, the more I do the thing, the more I get the result that I'm looking for. So going back to the values is I value helping people, but not to the extent that it hurts my family, or else I would be doing it for free all the time on Instagram. And then my kids would never see me. My wife would never see me. My 10 animals would never see me. My land would never get worked. And so there's these things that, I've created a life for myself that has a lot of responsibility, and I need to share with the world the things that I know in the time and space that I have to share them. And so if people don't want to buck up to the challenge then of confronting themselves and having this conversation or having a conversation, then I don't have time for it, because it's like arguing with a child and I don't want to do it. And because ultimately at the end of the day, anything that I bring up to people is only for their highest good. And so if I even waste my breath telling something, even if it's confrontational, abrasive, it's because I care about you enough to let you know this thing about yourself, not to belittle, diminish, bring down you in any sort of way, or any person in sort of way or circumstances to make myself get ahead. What I've noticed in my life is I share things with people and then they put that ahead of me and then actually turn around and not credit and belittle me about it. So I'm like,
what do you mean by that? What is
meaning?
What
I
do you mean?
share ideas with people and then they go and make tons of money off my ideas, or I'll share without any credit, and it's like becomes their idea. And I'm like, And after many, many times of having that happen, fortunately I've learned. And then people have their own thoughts because they hear me talk less and they go, oh, he must not know as much because he talks less. And either way, they're going to have an opinion or a judgment or some kind of thing. And because I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, it gets frustrating when people don't. If all they know is confrontation, then they get agitated when people don't confront them. So because I'm aware of that, I don't play the game. So if you don't play the game, then who's left playing the game? They are. They're sitting there playing with themselves.
Man, that's interesting. I didn't know that happened a lot. So do you feel like you've been burned by a lot of your friends? Or would these people ever been considered friends? Were they acquaintances?
Well, they are, they were acquaintances that some of them I thought were friends. Some of them were, business associates or acquaintances, and been burned by friends, people who, funny enough, friends with my kids, and we became friends through our kids together, and then end up being burned by them. And then after some time, it's like, okay, what have I not learned about the situation? And then, so now whenever I have someone that I want to turn from an acquaintance to a friend to a close friend, because those are the only people that I really keep around, is I test them with my honesty and see how they respond. And everyone that's in my life now that continues to choose to be in my life is there because they want to, and because they respect the values, the boundaries, and they respect and see Sarah and I not only as two individuals, but as a unit, and they don't infringe upon that unit. And I don't even have to tell them the boundaries because they are intelligent enough to pick up on themselves. And then also whenever those situations arise, when we bring it up, like a direct, like, hey, this is one of those things that, like, here's how we run this family. And they go, cool, I respect that while I'm here. And I'm like, cool. And then we move on. And then we continue our lives instead of it being like this upheaval of child traumas and all these things. And so I expect people to do the work if they want to. Like, for example, how many people do you think that know Paul C.H.E.K and go hang out with Paul C.H.E.K, and do you think he will let them into your house without any sort of self-awareness?
Not like zero.
Zero. The answer is zero. Unless it's their children, but even their children have more self-awareness than more adults have nowadays. And so that's kind of
his son who's like running around pooping on the floor and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's kind of what I'm sharing is, if there's no level of respect for self and for what, we're creating, or even an awareness of like, oh, these things are in place for a reason, then they find themselves weeding themselves out of our lives. And I'm perfectly okay with that, because I would enjoy my own company better than the company of let's say, people who are vampires or flatterers or deceivers or manipulators. I'd rather get the honesty up front.
Do you find you have a lot of people trying to like become friends with you because of who you know and the circles you run in? Do you find there's a lot of people that try to kind of like come in and then you are like guarding the door with honesty
Oh
and
yeah.
confronting?
Yeah, I mean, we know a lot of people with lots of followers, and they're friends of ours. And when they're like, "Oh, hey, do you think you could set up a podcast with them?" I go, "No, go reach out to them." I'm like, what about Paul? Can you send this to Paul? I'm like, no, like, and then and based on how they handle it is how I move forward. So if they get all pissy about it, then I know the relationship isn't really the relationship, And so I'm always willing to ask for, let's say connections or whatever. And if they say no, I go, cool. I respect that. Respect the hell out of that. And so then I move on with my life, and I find someone else that can create a new connection for me, so I can continue to, spread my wings or whatever I need to do. But there are people that they'll get really like offended that you won't bridge the gap for someone, even though you may sense that it's not a genuine interaction that they're trying to get, or it's almost like a stepping stone. And then so you kind of hold the stepping stone back until they prove themselves that they're, whatever the individual that they say they are. And because I have so much going on, I have so much patience for all the other stuff. Like, I'm not waiting for people to prove themselves. It's like they show up, and how they show up is how I receive them. And then if they show up in a bad mood, I call them out in their bad mood. And I go, what is that about? And then, and if they're like, nah, nothing, then I'm like, all right, well, it is what it is. Like, this person doesn't trust me enough to share their things with them. So I move on. You know what I mean? Yeah. And because, like I said, because I have so much going on, if people aren't there yet, they won't show up as themselves. So I'm okay with that. Because I love being alone. And that's, a lot of people do not like being alone. And I have 3 kids and a wife and 10 animals. So like, you could argue that I'm never alone, which is also another reason why I love being alone so much. So when people, take the time I have to be alone to play games, then I don't have any room for it.
Yeah, I hear you. Whew. I'm just like reflecting on right now. Yeah. Like, when you do start knowing more and more influential people as you start kind of climbing up that ladder, like, luckily, yeah, that'll be an interesting one, because I feel at the beginning you love the valid, like, or at least I'm projecting. I'm guessing as I get more and more influential, popular, or whatever, 100% people are gonna come out of the woodwork, be like, "Oh, Anton, my best buddy from high school, man, how are you doing?" And if this was a few years ago, I'd probably be incredibly flattered by that. If anything, I might even want to flaunt my influence by helping people with things. But it's like, at this point, yeah, like you said, I've also been burned a few times. And yeah, for me now, it's all just about genuine relationships and genuine connection.
Yeah, I wasn't always like this. Like, I used to be.
When did that
love to be
change?
flattered. About a couple years after, being in a relationship with Sarah, because she balanced me out. She does not like flattery, all those like lusty things, and so I was infatuated by those things. I was infatuated by people telling me how good of a practitioner I was. And then I would lower myself to the point where it would make me smaller, so that way it'll invite compliments.
Yeah. I've done that before too.
Yeah. And so when you don't need those anymore, you can when people are flattering you. Or
Ah.
if you still need it, like I'll give you an example. Someone wants something from you, and then they come up and they flatter you, they up and down, left and right, and then they make a request and you say no, and then watch the reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Wow.
I'm okay sitting in that because that's how I know. And if they're not genuine, like I get it when people say my hair looks nice. I'm like, it does. It looks really good. I know this thing about myself. And then but then they're like, you know, they'll like point out, like, let's say like something else. They'll point out like my shirt's really nice and it's like a plain green shirt. And I'm like, thank you. And then they're like, they're not flattering back. I'm so uncomfortable. Okay, I don't know what to do with this, you know? And then you start
Yeah.
seeing this like tension build up in them. And then because I don't need it, I'm not like a child that gets an Xbox on Christmas that are like, that's all that's in their face. And they're like, I cannot wait to be immersed in this thing, you know? That I'm not ready. I don't need to, I don't have that immersion in that compliment. And so if it's not given freely, then I don't want it.
Mm.
It takes a lot of like time to feel that with the opposite side of that.
Mm. And then yeah, you met Sarah 8 years ago. So you were 26 around when you're talking about
26,
this.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hmm. And when did you meet Paul? And when did you go through all the CHEK stuff? When you're 25, 26?
No, I started going when I was in 2010, or I bought a correspondence course 2019, I think, 2010. 2010 was, I think it was when I took my first course. I think I started in 2009, not 2019. 2009 is when I first was introduced to Paul. Um, yeah, 2008, 2009, I was introduced to Paul. And then I've been coaching, training since 2006, 2007.
Yeah, because my question is, so how old were you when you started the Paul stuff? Like 19?
20, yeah, 2019, 20, 21, something around there.
And
I know I took my, go ahead.
yeah, I'm very curious. Can you share, like, walk us through how have you seen yourself change from, because 20, man, I remember when I was 20, I was a fucking mess. Like, Jesus, dude. So I'm curious, run us through, yeah, 20 up until now. What have been the big pivotal moments, the big themes? How have you seen yourself change in the last 14 years?
I mean, it's almost unrecognizable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was still like this, headstrong, knew I studied, knew I applied things. And it was the person that introduced me to Paul Czech basically called me out and was like, why can't I do this one thing? And in the PT world, or in the training world. And I was like, I don't know. Where did you learn this? And that's where my curiosity is always like, where did you learn this thing? And then so they told me, well, there's two options. One is Paul Czech. And then so I was like, Paul Czech seems, something in my gut is like, do that.
Hmm.
And so I don't think as much as I go do stuff, which probably why I have more experience and probably more pain and other things like that than most people. Cause I'm like, there's an idea. Let's go try it. I'm a lot better at that now. So then before I go try it, I go discern, is this something that is this aligned towards my dream? Is this aligned with my values? Is this something I want to do? This is not actually something I want to do, but it sounds fun, but I don't really want to do it. Okay, cool. I'm going to go back to doing what I was doing previously. Pivotal moments. I mean, it's hard to like,
Yeah,
hard.
who were, like, I know you just said you're kind of the same person you are now when you're 20, but I'm guessing like less, like, yeah, how, yeah, what were you like when you were 20? You know, what were you like when you started the CHEK stuff? What were you like when you met Sarah? What were you like in years of being with Sarah up until now, starting a family, all that kind of stuff?
How it was like when I first started with Paul. I was still confident with the things that I knew. Um, Very insecure with my body.
Really? How so?
Chased women. I mean, I was fat kid growing up. And then I started noticing around 14 that people change the way they interact with you based on what your body looks like. That was my understanding from back then. And now it's people interact with you the way you interact with you.
Yeah.
And so, because then it always confused me how these like really overweight comedians have these like really like hot wives. And I was like, oh, because they don't see themselves as that. And yes, their choices of life are really messed up. But people could see you for you and your soul and your humor, and that's what they're attracted to. And that may not be a value for another person, you know. So back to insecure with the way I looked, how I felt, not expressing things the way I wanted to express, emotionally clogged up. Even though I'm full of emotion, but I didn't know how to express it properly. And whenever it would get clogged up, it would go to the channels that I knew how, which was anger and distance. And so if you didn't get anger, you got distance. And if you didn't get distance, you got anger. So those are my ways of expressing my needs in the past. And if I try to express sadness and it was stopped by some way because didn't feel heard or seen or whatever, then it went to distance or anger, one of those two. So it was when I first started the CHEK Institute, I knew that I knew things that other people didn't, because I could tell. It's like the analogy was like people were looking at a pig, calling it a cow, and I'm like, do y'all not see this? Like, this is blatantly obvious a pig.
Aleks,
so
I'm curious, like, was this intuitive, or were you studying at this point, or was this just like an intuitive, like, for whatever reason, I feel like I know this is the way it is, but other people can't see it?
Both.
Gotcha.
Because that's how I found Paul. I mean, he told me, the guy that introduced me to Paul gave me another option. It was actually Charles Poliquin. And he told me about both of those guys. And I went and bought all of Paul's introductory courses, HLC1, all of his correspondence courses, exercise coach at the time. Now it's IMS1, golf biomechanics. I bought them without even looking who Paul was. I went on his website, found all of his courses that were entry level, and I bought them all. And then when I put the DVD in, it was like puzzle pieces on this big puzzle map that I had that were missing for a long time. And then it started filling in gaps. And I was like, this is what I've been looking for. So my intuition leads me to certain places. And so the same feeling I had when I met Paul was the same feeling I had when I met Sarah. And I was like, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to keep investigating this.
What did that feel like with a woman? Like, what did that feel like to find someone and be that pull? What was that aroma like? Sensation? Can you describe it?
Have you ever walked into a room and you were kind of surprised, but then you felt like home? And then you were like...
Go on.
And then you were questioning whether you're actually home because you're feeling so comfortable, but you're in like a different state. And then you know you're home, but you don't recognize home, but you feel like you're home. And where everything in you could feel your whole body and everything feels warm. And then you know things about this person that they haven't told you yet. And you haven't made any effort to know them. Like you haven't like consciously like analyzed or observed. They're like, how do I know these things? Certain things that make sense. So whenever I was around Sarah, my intuition was amplified. At such an exponential rate that it felt like the most real thing, to the point where I questioned my reality around it.
Wow.
So it was the same thing with like, buying the CHEK courses. And then my parents being like, why are you spending all this money? You're trying to save up money so you can move out and, raise a family and meet someone and this and that. It was the hero's journey where your greatest, supporters become, your villains in the story temporarily until they come back and become your greatest supporters again. And it was that same thing where I became my own villain, going like, this can't be real. We know each other's, we would play telepathic games with each other, and we would write things on paper so that way we couldn't change our answers. And then we would say our answers verbally and then show each other the paper, and like we would timestamp notes and screenshot them and then describe experiences that we're doing. And it was like one of those things where it was so real that it couldn't have been real, but it was the most real that I've ever felt. And I've noticed at that point when I don't pray very often, and when I pray, I pray for the wisdom to see what I need to see that my ego won't let me see in front of me. So I go, if I need to see something, please override my ego and make it so obvious that I can't turn away from it. And so those moments are those when I can't turn my head away, I go, this must be something I need to continue in. And even like a year into Sarah and I being in a relationship together, I think Sarah, we were having an argument, and Sarah would be like, why do you even love me? Why do you love me? And my answer to her was not nice for her to hear, but it makes sense now, years later. But I go, I don't know, but I'm willing to stay and find out, because I don't know what this gravitation that we have towards each other, but I know it's not an accident. And my stubbornness will override my ego to follow what my soul is telling me to follow. And so that's the commitment I have with my soul, where as irritating as something might be, when it's time, let me know and I will be a slave to it. And those are those things that's how we met. And so since then, Sarah's very emotionally intelligent and very, very her communication is very, very buttoned up and expressive and like she can either fill your world or she can assassinate you with words. She's like one of those.
Yeah.
And so at the same time, it's like I'm learning how to be around her. And so, like almost like how when you got on this podcast, you were like, you kind of like prepped the audience for me. You translated my directness to an audience member that is potential listening that could be like, forget this guy, I'm going to turn this off. Yeah. That's what Sarah used to do for me. And then because I'm highly observant, I watch how Sarah communicates to other people what I want to say.
Wow.
And then I try to then bridge the gap of like, they received that much better than I said it. And I'm like, okay, maybe around these certain feelings around people, I need to communicate it this way. So I'm always changing the way I speak, because to my 6.5-year-old, my 13-year-old, my almost 17-year-old, and my 42-year-old wife, I speak very differently to.
Wow. That was actually what because when I was trying to formulate that question about half an hour ago about the different kinds of communication and the different conversations, to tell you the truth, man, I was trying to formulate that in a way that didn't offend you, didn't hurt your feelings. That's why I was like, how do I say this? But you just said it perfectly. Like, I was curious because with how direct you are, I was wondering if you ever modify the way you communicate so that you can bridge different gaps with different people that have different emotional or communication styles,
I will say anyone that ever approaches me with curiosity will never hurt my feelings. And if you don't approach me with curiosity, then you won't get my time. So that's usually the two downsides. And so if you're going to be a child, then I'm not going to pay attention to children that are dressed up in adult bodies. And if you come at me with curiosity, I'll be happy to explain myself until I realize that people, let's say they're not interested in learning. So I noticed that they're repeating the same question differently the whole time. And I'm like, this is annoying. So if you don't want to learn, then that's fine. Then I don't need to be seen by you. And you need to see me to feel something for yourself. And so label me the villain. I'll clear the space anyway. And then you can have your lesson whenever you're ready to open that box of lessons. But at the same time, I change the way I speak to certain people. And then when I say things that are blunt and direct, it could either be a listen, because you really need to hear this and I'm not wasting my breath, or it could be a pattern interrupt, and it's always for a reason, or a test. like new people. Like, let's see if they can handle my direct me. Because if they can't handle me, then they're probably not going to want to hang around me.
Did you do that to
Which
me when we first met? Was that what you did on purpose?
No, but that's how I show up all the time. And then if they can see me for something that's beyond the initial jar of my personality, and they're like, but this guy I feel has a good heart, I'm going to keep finding out. And the moment they see that, then I interact differently. And it's always different. I always interact with people's souls. I'm not interacting with egos. I'm confronted with egos, but I speak to people's souls because I don't have time to waste. Like if someone's like, hey, I don't know why this fungal infection won't go away. And as they're holding like a cup of coffee, a kombucha, and a bag of like Skittles, and they're like, it's the Skittles and the coffee thing. I'm like, you don't see that? They're like, and then their opportunity is to go, oh, you're right. Thanks for bringing this up. I was unconscious about this. Or, maybe they don't have to say anything. They'll go, ugh. And if they're like, no, this can't be it, then I go, great, I'm going to move on with my life because I'm not going to go deeper into this. Go look up Doug Hoffman and whatever, say a name of a book that they need to go look at. So that way we could be on the same page. And then if they do, then they'll go, oh, he was right. And then they'll come back and talk to me again. But if they don't do it, then they're never going to come back and talk to me again. Because everything that I speak to is for people's hearts and their souls. And sometimes the jar is what shakes the ego. And sometimes, how do you get fruit out of a tree? Freaking shake it.
Yeah. I feel it's a delicate balance. It's I get what you're saying though. It's like if you shake and they leave, they probably weren't meant to stay. They probably weren't vibrating at a frequency that both of you were aligned with, that there would be any room for harmony with. It's definitely uncomfortable at times though. But that directness, man. Especially go on.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, Aleks, you go.
Because ultimately, I want to know why people want to talk to me.
Really?
Like, what is your intention with showing up to my house or calling me? Because, like, why? Think about like a bison in the field. Why do you want to go be friends with the bison? Why do you want to poke it? Do you want to ride it? Do you want to walk with it? Do you want to eat it? The bison, but if you get too close, you might get killed. I'm not saying I'm gonna go kill people, but the point is, you might get hurt, whether it be like mentally, emotionally, something might get bruised. So I want to know, why do you want to approach, like, people see me as like some kind of different creature? It's like, why do you want to approach this creature? So there's something from me that people want. And the people that I get along most with is when they don't want anything from me.
Yeah. When I reached out to you, what came across to you when I reached out to you?
That you wanted to do a podcast with me.
What was it? Was that all it was to you, or did you feel like when you talk about getting into someone's soul? Yeah, I'm curious because now that you bringing this up, this is actually really interesting. Because why do you think when you met me in the first, let's say, like minute, what was the impression of why you think I reached out to you?
Because you liked what I heard, what I said on a podcast, and you wanted to have your own conversation with me. And I wanted to hear what your conversation was about and what you wanted to talk to me about. And I'm always hoping it's not like, tell me your story from life to birth,
Just like the question I just asked you.
A little bit, but you didn't pry on it. So I'm like, because I'm like, it's like this. I talk about it a lot, and I feel like we miss who I am, talking about who I am and the value I'm sharing with people as to, because usually there's not very many round twos in podcasts. So it's always like, what did you hear that I said that you want to talk to me about, that you want me to share with the world on your platform? Those are the kind of things that I look for. And and sometimes, you know, if people want to have a conversation, I'm usually up for having a conversation. I don't I rarely say no to podcasts because I like them. They're fun.
Yeah.
And I can go back and go on like Apple and type in my name, and I can actually see my own development of the things that I was talking about, the things that I used to think about. And if you study on my, like, from chronologically listen to the podcast, you can see how my thinking evolves. And so that way there's certain things that I've gotten rid of and, you know, don't serve me anymore. But at the same time, I did want to question when you said you didn't want me on your podcast because you didn't only put me on, wanted me on your podcast because you thought I was smart. And I'm like, well, would you want a dumb guy on a podcast that, you know, doesn't share information? I was like, nah. I was like, he's saying that to make me feel comfortable, but it's okay. Or maybe he's not.
So say that again. Go into that.
I remember it was like, you know, I wanted to invite you on my podcast because you seem like a good guy, not because you were smart, not because you're smart, even though I know you're smart. I'm like, no, I have something to offer. And you see that. That's okay. And that's why people reach out.
No, that's actually, no, that's not, I didn't invite you on because I thought you were intelligent. I did not.
But if I didn't have anything intelligent to say or wise to say, I'm not saying that's the only reason.
I know, and no, I'm just, the reason why I'm pushing on this is because, like, I really, I want to get with you, and because when you were talking about how you met Sarah, and Sarah asked you, why do you love me? Why are you with me? And you said, I don't know why, but I'm drawn to you and I want to find out. That's actually more the reason I reached out to you. The reason I gave you when I reached out to you of like, oh, I like what you talk about fatherhood or all this bullshit. I needed to find a reason to communicate with you, to get you to come on my podcast that was logical because we live in a logical world. I can't just be like, hey man, I like you and I don't know why, and come on my podcast. You'd be like, you're fucking crazy, dude. So, but legitimately, no, I did not bring you, obviously, you're a smart guy. I like what you talk about. But like the way that you told Sarah, to tell you the truth, man, I don't know why I'm drawn to you and why I wanted you to come on. It was more of an intuitive thing. I was like, I want to get this guy on the podcast. And it's interesting because I find you kind of mysterious too, because I find you very different than me. And you know, like there's lots of times in this conversation right now that like, little mini confrontation. I'll be a little confronted here, a little confronted there. You'll be talking about people, like all these people want something. I was like, is he talking about me? Like I can kind of see, you know what I mean? And it's like, for whatever reason, I'm very curious about you. Just the way you look at things. I also, interestingly enough, we might talk about this privately off a podcast, but I'll just say it. Like it's interesting. I find at times the way you communicate about things can sometimes feel like offensive. Like it's like almost preemptively defensive. And it's like I'm still learning how to like talk about this kind of stuff with people, like that kind of vulnerable stuff, because those are the conversations I want to have, man. Like I don't like bullshit. I you know, a lot of the ways that I'm still learning how to be more courageous, more honest in podcasts, because you know I want to get to that point where I'm like Joe Rogan and I can ask anything and I'm like a fucking wizard and no one gets like confronted. Like I'm always in my mind, I'm like, I want to get to the point where I can summon the conversation I want to have about anything I want to talk about in the person, and I can say it in a way that doesn't confront people. Because I know I still do that sometimes. I'm like, how, like, maybe because when I ask a question that I want to know, that I want to connect with someone over, I know if someone asked me that question, it would be so delicate because it would be confronting for me. Like if someone asked that and it didn't land, I'd be like, oh, that's deep, you know, that's really deep. And it's, Yeah, I feel like I'm like learning trial by fire with you, because I find, again, you have the kind of personality that confronts me, and that's very uncomfortable for me. Like someone that is very like, if people don't fucking like me, well, fuck you. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm just like, whoa, like I'm the ops. I'm like, I'm very accommodating. I'm very much like, I'll give you 5 chances. You know what I mean? If like, if you fuck up. And this is all to say, like, yeah, I find you very interesting, man. And I don't know why I'm drawn to you.
So I love that we're having this conversation because I can share with you, lead with that and not because of something else. It's almost like meeting a woman and being like, I don't know why I'm attracted to you, but it's definitely not because of your ass. And so to me, I'm like, but why take a piece of me away? I'm like, enjoy the whole piece.
Yeah.
But I also understand how people aren't ready for that kind of conversation. But if you literally led with that honesty and left it at that honesty and stood there, I'd have been like, yeah, right on. I could see that. I'm a different thinking, acting human being, and yeah, let's hop on a mic and have a conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me know that. But then again, you're a unique person. Will that land on the average, person? And that's something I'm coming to terms with. I'd love to get to the point, maybe I'll actually start doing that. I'll just be like, hey man, I like you for whatever reason. I feel drawn to you. I'd love to have you on a podcast and talk. Yeah, it's a radical change because we're not taught to be that way in society. We're really not taught to be that, because it's almost a spiritual thing. It's like, it almost gets in this idea of like past lives and soulmates and soul clicks and all that kind of thing. But yeah, man, that's what I want to get to with people. Because yeah, I still get nervous sometimes. I still, because you get rejected. You get, your entire life you get rejected by girls when you ask them out. You get rejected by people. You get rejected by your parents. You get rejected by teachers. You get rejected by society. If I'm this way at my job 2 years ago, my fucking boss would look at me like I'm a crazy person. You know what I mean? Because I worked at Good Life Fitness like 2.5 years ago before COVID, or just after COVID. And so it's like I'm still kind of coming to terms with, I'm having to like completely reevaluate and do a 180 on everything that I've created to feel safe. How I've learned to act in the world, how I've learned to connect with people, how I've learned to appear to people so that they will be able to connect. You know what I mean?
100%. I feel like I'm one of those, and if I was in a video game, I'd be one of those bosses that tests people alignment and integrity. And so it's like,
I don't know what video game that would be, the integrity and alignment Dark Souls video game or something.
Yeah. Well, like the point of what I was saying is like, because I don't flip flop on those things, like when someone says the thing, let's say we were talking about earlier about the intelligence thing, or you're always going to get, like, if anyone says that to me, they're going to get the same response from me. So I'm very consistent with the way I am. And when people come at me directly, honestly, and then are okay with whatever I say, and I'm not talking about like in a way of like, oh, I want you to, go on a bender with me. Now, I would appreciate that much more than someone who goes, hey man, let's go out and let's go here. And then they kind of lure me into a bar, and then I have these weird feeling, and then I'll never trust that person again. Versus someone that comes up to me and goes, hey, let's go on a bender. And I go, I'm not into that. How about you come over to my place and we do some yard work, or we smoke some bags out of the volcano, or we, cook food at home. I don't want to be driving around and then have to eat fast food. So if you can handle that, we can continue today. Or I'm going to go home and eat because my blood sugar is getting low and I'm tired, and I'm going to get cranky. So I always appreciate directness of what people need, want, desire from me. And that's what makes me like people more. And the more consistent they are with it, the more they're going to get more uh, responses from me. Or, because if people can't handle the word no, all I hear in my head is someone that hasn't learned how to heal their father wound.
Mm.
And because, they can't say no to their father. And then it continues to happen. And then they get upset that, they're projecting father onto me and I'm saying no without even no regard over why I said no. And so, in a sense, because I come from a place of non-judgment on, it's like, hey, if you want to go to Bender, go on a Bender. Like, that doesn't involve me. Like, I'm not judging you. You'll learn that it sucks at some point, because I've been on tons of Benders, and I feel like garbage every time I do. So I don't do it anymore. And I'm not doing it because I'm judging people that drink alcohol. And I've drunk myself into holes before. Like, it's not fun for me anymore. So I don't do it. And so it doesn't come from a place of judgment that, no, it's like, yeah, that doesn't interest me. Here are the 5-6 things that interest me that I'll do. And anything that doesn't fit into those 5-6 things, I don't want to do. And if you want to still spend time with me, that means you got to find something for me to do that fit these 6 buckets. Go out paddleboarding, go do something active, go, have some tea somewhere or smoke some bags or, so I have my own operating system of how I like to function. And so the more people have respect over me, because I'm going to respect people's choices of what they want to do. And that's all I appreciate that very greatly when people come at me like that. Even if it's like, hey, do you want to do a business venture together? Like, one of the things, like, for example, hey, can I pick your brain? No, people can't pick my brain. Spent a lot of time picking my own brain, and coming to these things, you pay for my time, and then I'll share things with you. Because if you're picking my brain for 4 hours, I'm not making money to support my family for 4 hours, or the yard, or hanging out with my kids. Like, these are the things that are going through my brain, but people don't see them as disrespectful or boundary overstepping because they're so used to it. So when I present them a hard no, it's like, I haven't emotionally grown enough to withstand this yet.
Yeah, I think a big part of that, from what my experience is, almost everyone's codependent. And like, I can see that in myself too. It's like, yeah, definitely. Because I think a lot of the time we have a genuine want, or we have a genuine question, and then we also have some codependency. We also want something, and it's like we have all of these different factors locked into the same space, and it's really hard to differentiate them. And then if we have shadows and we're unaware of all of these things mixed up, it's really complicated. And then when someone says no to something that we think we want genuinely, but really we want something from somebody, it hurts us, or we get uncomfortable, or we feel like someone's saying no to us as a human being, not no to our request or no to our idea. And even that's difficult. That's something I still definitely am challenged by, is differentiating my ideas from who I am, differentiating my stance in the world from who I am, differentiating my business from who I am, my brand from who I am. It's like, when you live in a capitalistic structure and with social media and everything, so much of the time there's so much pressure to make money or succeed. And yeah, I know for me, it's like you end up feeling this like pull to becoming your brand. And it's like being strong and being confident and being a leader. There's a lot of I feel like a pressure that I always have to like self-reflect on. Like, where is this coming from?
Yeah, who's putting that pressure on you?
Me.
Why?
Likely father wounds. Never felt like I was good enough. Heavily criticized when I was a kid. Yeah. And then codependent with my mother because my father was very emotionally abusive. So then I became codependent with my mom to survive that. And then so I know like I am hyper aware of other people's expectations and their feelings. And then so I'm always, not always, but I'm often, I have the ability to understand people's expectations and feel their energies. And then so if I tune into that too much, I lose myself in merging with, yeah, the emotions and people's expectations. You know what I mean?
And that's where a lot of the wounded, the word that's coming up is like fairies, but that's not the word I want to use. But that's kind of like paints the picture of like people who spend too much time in here and never like with their feet on the ground, and they're thinking so much, but they're not actually doing anything that changes it. So like, for example, like people who get together and they talk about their wounds, but never take a step forward to healing the wounds. And talking is healing, but without action, it's air. It doesn't create material change. And then they go, well, maybe I'll go do some ayahuasca. And that'll do it. And then that blows their lid off even further. Then they're crying, they're crapping themselves. And then they go back. And then because their environment and also their integration isn't complete, they go back to trying to be important, being a leader, you know, being influential on Instagram or whatever. And then these wounds start creeping up out of the woodwork again. And then you go back to ayahuasca because that'll do the job. And then they do it again. And it becomes a cycle. And I keep watching these people go through these cycles. And I'm like, okay, hold on a second. Once this ball comes around, grab it. Okay, relax. You don't have to be in the cycle anymore. Like, what are some things that you can actually apply? These are the things here. I'll show you how I do it in an easy perspective. I heard, you know, father wounds through, you know, let's say codependency through abusive relationship with parents. So pick one thing that you would change and then continuously put it in your awareness and see if you could find it in every single angle of your psyche. Aleks is really bringing my codependency. I feel like I can't get to where I need to go unless I talk to Aleks. He always brings me clarity. Okay, great. I'm insecure, but okay, have I listened to what Aleks said? I keep going to Aleks for all these things, but what has he already told me? Okay, let's say example, stop caring what people have to say. All right. And then you feel it. You sit in that like we were talking about. I want to get to know you because I feel like you're an interesting person. And that's it. And then you sit in that feeling. And then you practice telling that to all the people that it feels genuine to. And then how they react is out of your control. Without having to make it in somehow in back into your control or to force a connection, you observe it for what it is. And then if they separate and they come back. And then after doing that a bunch of times, you'll go, I've chosen to do that so much that it's actually not that uncomfortable anymore. What's the next thing? So then after 10, 15 years of you practicing, integrating these little tiny steps, they become parts of your character. And so that way, when you tell someone, you know, they give you a gift of anger and you go, yeah, no, thanks. I don't want that. And then you watch them like the box is like shaking all over the place, but like, well, I don't want it. And you're like, well, I don't want it either. I didn't ask for it. And I could always say, no, I don't need a gift of anger. So you can keep it. And then watching people, then maybe the next step is watching people be angry at you for you upholding your boundaries in a adult way, not a childish way. Like, no, I'm not going to play with you because you didn't play with me, you know, because that happens all the time. So it's observing your psyche from all the different situations. And sometimes it's better to do it when you're not in the heat of it.
Yeah.
So for example, if you had like this situation didn't work out, don't try to make it work there. Go figure out why it didn't work. And some people are there to show you why it doesn't work. And those are those things that create first awarenesses into habits, into character changes. And then once you realize what your boundaries and your values are, the more you uphold them, the more your life will change for the better. And you go, you know what? I like this life more than I like that life. And I'm going to keep pursuing this life because this life is way more harmonious. All the things that I ever wanted and desired are now happening. Why would I ever go back? Like once you've seen that if you could put those things into action and your whole life changed, like I showed you where I live and all those things, if my core values and boundaries and dream got me here, I wouldn't want to repeat that process. But a lot of people haven't experienced that. So I don't blame them for being frustrated about the boundaries and the way I do things because if they saw, they would do the same thing. So I can't fault them for not knowing. So I don't judge them for not knowing. I'm only here as a mirror for them to know that when they get more comfortable with these deep truths or these uncomfortable feelings that we sit in, that there's so much better on the other side.
Before this will be the last thing we talk about before we finish up, because we all hear, or at least I hear that a lot. The mirror, right? Everyone talks about that. In your perspective, when someone says like everybody is a mirror for you, what does that mean to you?
If you don't know who you are, they're going to reflect outside of you. So that way they're going to reflect, for example, if you're an asshole and then all of a sudden you meet someone that's a bigger asshole than you, they're your mirror to see what an asshole looks like. And you're going to go, you're an asshole, but what people don't see is the three fingers pointing back at you as you're a bigger asshole most of the time. Have you heard that saying, when you point a finger, you have three pointing back at you?
Yeah.
So if you call someone an asshole, you're 3 times the bigger asshole. For the psyche to create an awareness, you first need to project that awareness outside of yourself. So onto other people. That's when this whole thing about like everything's a projection, everyone's projecting. But that falls apart when you know who you are. So when you know who you are and certain things that you're not, like when someone calls you an asshole, you go, I'm not an asshole. I am honest and I'm trying to help you. So if that means an asshole, well, then no one's going to be able to help you. Because you've associated asshole with truth.
At least in that way, the way they're presenting it.
But then to people that present it differently. So once again, is they encounter those assholes enough until they get enough of the mirror to go, maybe I'm an asshole and I haven't been listening. So the mirror works for when you're learning something new outside of yourself. But people use it to bypass their actual work. See what I'm saying?
Not really that last part. What do you mean by that last part?
Meaning, so they project onto the other person that if they're the mirror, that means they're the mirror for them, and they have nothing to work on, and all I'm doing is reflecting your behavior back to you.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
But if you want to mirror how you want people to treat you, why would you mirror the same behavior back to them and be an asshole back? So if someone's rude to you, you mirror to them kindness. And because you know who you are, you're not going to be their shadow mirror. You're going to be their mirror of the opposite side of the coin. But if you don't know who you are, you're going to be in a clumsy hall of mirrors for a while. So when people get enough mirrors, they can reject their shadow, and then they call it projection. They go, oh, they're projecting onto me, when really they're projecting onto the mirror, which is projecting onto themselves, and they're seeing their own reflection in everyone, and they're rejecting their own reflection, ultimately burying them further into their shadow. Does that make sense?
That's a lot. I'm processing I'm processing all of that. Is there ever times where you are not an asshole and someone's being an asshole, and you go, man, that person's being an asshole, but is actually not a projection or a mirror? where it's just you just noticing something in someone else that you don't have anymore. Or if you were blissed out and perfect, would you even notice that negative thing in someone else?
I'll give you an example. If a child comes up to you and says your hair looks stupid, how do you react?
Okay. That's
Why?
okay. Because it's just a child. Because I don't respect or value the perspective of a child in that way if I don't. Unless it's an insightful child. Yeah.
So, yeah. The point is because it doesn't affect you because you don't let it affect you. And when you have an adult that calls you out on your trauma that is deep in there, that's hiding, you're allowing it to affect you because it agitates. It brings it up into your awareness. And so when you, I want to say two things. So when it gets highlighted in you, it's a chance for you to bring it up and actually work on the thing. What a lot of people in the spiritual communities are doing now is they're detaching from it. So they're not learning from it. They're not learning from the agitation that, let's say, the mirror, when you say things and the people mirror the behavior back to you, because they're so ultra spiritual, they don't actually learn the lesson. They become more and more detached and actually separated from their body. And that is a problem.
Is it almost like something's coming up with them and they're going, well, we're spiritual, nothing exists anyway, so the thing that is the feeling arising in me doesn't exist either, meaning I don't have to look or take it seriously, rather than feeling something arise and going, okay, that's a mirror showing, and it's showing me something, a trauma still in me, and then rather than looking at that and dealing with it, they just like bypass it and go, oh, it's all bullshit anyway.
Yeah, I can give you an example. So if you come at me all angry and I am in a centered state, and let's say you say something that I find disrespectful, you've agitated my level of how much respect I demand of people. And if there's an ego attachment to this level of respect that I expect from people, you might get the horns, you might get the bull or the lion's teeth. If I recognize there's something wounded inside of you because I have moved past this level of respect and there's no point in engaging with people that have, let's say wounds, and that's not in their character. First, you have to deem, is that their character? Or because you're centered and you go, oh, well, clearly this person's hurting. Well, what are they hurting from? Let's figure it out why. So the person that isn't traumatized or from their past and triggered by the comments, they can go, well, what is this thing that's actually happening right now? Like, are you hungry? Did someone hurt you? No, no one hurt me, and then they're going off on these things and you're like, well, what is it? And then so it's like you're talking to a child. But then once you find the unmet need, which takes a lot of practice, and people can start by reading Nonviolent Communication by Waylon Myers and practice the actual things 1 year in a heated environment. And once you can find people's needs, usually they get calmed down. Sometimes they don't, but at least you mirror to them the way you want to be treated versus fall into the game of also being agitated. If your safety is not compromised. Now, if your safety is being compromised, it's a whole different story. And it's once again, back up. You're going to get it, like, especially if you're trained in combat or whatnot. And so because a person isn't agitated, they don't receive that and they can see something for what it is and they're hurting. So you are the mirror to them of how they should treat people. They are the mirror to you as to what you've already healed inside of yourself versus reflecting back maybe 5-10 years ago, how you might have lit into this person for being disrespectful and how dare you come at me like that versus seeing someone for having unmet needs and they don't know how to express them clearly. So whenever those people come up at you and you can remain centered like a child when they're like, your hair's stupid, your earphones look dumb and there's better ones out there. And you're like, what makes you say those things? And then they're like, no one's asked me. We always engage and I always have a fight. And I'm always reaffirmed that I'm a problem and that everyone's a jerk. So once you know who you are and your limits of your personality and the limits of your triggers, and then you're working on them, they're not that you detach from them, is they don't bother you anymore. That's the thing. But when people don't do the work, then they distance themselves from their heart, which means they can't actually talk to people from their heart. They're talking to them from somewhere else outside of their body. And they're giving some either fragmented psyche because they're so traumatized that they're fractured, their soul splits into a different fragment. And they're talking from that fragment from somewhere distant, not in their body where they can feel the pain, somewhere else.
Wow.
But when you're in your body, you feel what they're saying. And you also feel inside yourselves where they're hurting, the mirror. So because you know yourself, you're like, I wasn't hurting there before. I wonder why I would hurt there. Why would I hurt there? When have I hurt there before? I'm like, I was anxious at some point. Okay. And then my left shoulder would hurt when I was anxious. But you have to know these things. Like it takes a lot of work to process these things. And then you can go, oh, well, are you anxious? Are you feeling anxious? Well, yeah, of course I'm anxious. Don't you see that I'm anxious? I'm like, no, it looks like you're angry. Is there anything else you can, why are you anxious? Well, I'm like, I have rent to pay and this and that. And I'm like, oh, so is this about money? Like, are you nervous? And then I'm like, well, yeah. Aren't you nervous about money? No. Well, but I remember a time when I was nervous about money. So that's why I can see why you're nervous about money, as an example. And then you can go, well, if you have the time, space, willingness, all those things, go, well, tell me, what's the problem? Like, is there something that I can do for you? Or do you want to vent? And then sometimes they'll go like, is there anything you can do for me? I don't know. What's the situation? And then you have a conversation. But if you meet them with how they showed up, then you get nothing done. Especially if you love and care for this person. If it's someone from the street, then it's like, I literally don't have time for this right now. And they become the mirror of what you've healed and unhealed, and someone yells at you in anxiety. And then you go, oh, I can see they're hurting, but I don't have time for this. So, and they see how they were treated. They get some love and kindness unconsciously. And then you go on about your day. So you become a mirror for other people of how they should treat other people. And that's the mirror projection to the mirror. And then eventually, if people aren't brave enough to be in their bodies and feel the things that they're feeling, they disconnect from their bodies and call everything a projection. And then they're the mirror for everybody. And, everyone's less wise than they are. And then they project it to me that I'm all knowing. And I'm like, I'm not all knowing, but I do know a lot. And at the same time, I'll admit when I'm wrong because I live with 4 women. And I am really good at admitting when I'm wrong. Like, babe, you're right. Yes, I will go apologize to mom. Yes, I didn't say thank you. You're right. My manners should be better. I'll go say thank you. All day,
Yeah, I know. I feel you, man. But that's where we're gonna finish up. And now, before we officially finish up, please share with us what you're currently working on and where people can find you.
They could find me on Instagram at health.performance.engineer. They could find my website. I'm kind of doing it backwards, I realized. My website is, Sarah and I's website is primalfusionhealth.com. And what I'm currently working on is building my online community where basically people come in and ask questions like this. And Sarah and I have frameworks and courses as to how to find your dream, how to find your values, how to know where your boundaries are, what are your archetypes, how do you assess dreams. And we go live every Monday. Actually, before this, I went live for 2.5 hours and we talked deeply about a certain thing, because the idea is you don't want to gloss over things like an Instagram post. We want to make sure that you grasp what you're doing, because you can't ask better questions unless you really understand the material. And I said understand because I'm not standing under the material. It's inside of me. I understand it. I stand inside of myself fully. And then we ask better questions. So the community evolves as practitioners, as people, as fathers, as mothers, as daughters and siblings. all the things, but people get better. And we talk about from things like farming to detoxification to, personal work to trauma to childhood things. And people can, like, you would think like taking up 2 hours of someone's time in the call is like a bad thing, but everyone learns from it. Everybody learns from it. And everyone's like, the idea is to keep as non-judgment, no judgment, no bullying, no picking. Like, we're here to learn, and anyone that's not here to learn is not going to fit in. Because if you're going to be asking the same things and you're not learning, it's going to get boring to you. So we're growing as practitioners. I go over case studies with people. So many things that we go deep on in Primal Pride. And people can go to members.primalpride.com or primalpride.com and join us. Everyone gets a free week. But we're here to expand or contract what people, need to feel, because some people are too blown out already. So then we got to ground them. And then some people are so grounded that, or so in themselves that they don't know how to look outside themselves. And then we have to teach people how to, all the things from meditation to breath work and the mechanics of breathing. And, and if you're breathing, you don't have the mechanics of breathing, what muscles you need to release to properly. And if you can't release the muscles, who do you need to go see? Like, all those things are so intimately interwoven and easily searched. And how to take care of yourself and help yourself. And when you're stuck, you go to office hours, and we go deep on it for 2 to 3 hours every Monday. And that's what I'm currently building with my wife to share with the world. And then we have our herbs, Primal Fusion Herbs. I'm sure some of you guys will see me smoking a bag. So we have primalfusionherbs.com for any of you Paul C.H.E.K following volcano smoking people out there.
Well, Aleks, thank you very much for coming on, man. This was an interesting and definitely confronting conversation. And I know some people like me that are listening I think what I got out of this conversation a lot is how to feel when you're confronted, and how to still stay open enough to see who the person is confronting you, who they really are, and like keep your heart open as much as possible, and not shut down, and to stay open and just constantly going like in and out, opening and closing the valve and stuff. And as I said, man, like, being around people like you is not something I'm used to, and so I value it greatly to be able to be around someone like you that is trustworthy and is compassionate. Because there's a lot of people that are confronting that don't care about people and that are not compassionate. And they're the ones that traumatize and hurt you and cause a lot of pain when you're still in the process of healing yourself. So, I'll be reflecting on this for a time to come for sure, brother.
Thank you for having me on here, and thank you for bringing all that up. People need to hear it. People need to go through it, and realizing that people come out the tunnel better. It's not worse if they actually go through the process. So thank you for participating with me in that and being honest, and that's all I can ask for.
Amen, brother. And take care, everyone. Love you. Bye. Thanks for tuning into the show today, everybody. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to check out more like it, click right here. Also, be sure to let me know in the comment section below what you enjoyed most about this episode and what you want to see more of in the future. And that's it. So I'll see you all in the next episode. I love you. Bye.